Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska weather with us tonight. Wherever you're watching from around Alaska, we hope that you are staying safe from the weather and enjoying the increasing amount of daylight that's coming back to Alaska so quickly. It is almost the spring equinox, and it's a fun time of the year no matter where you are. Here's a look at what's going on across the region tonight. We'll start, of course, with our Alaska Weather Information line. You can always call us 1-800-472-0391. You can find all of this information on our website, weather.gov/Alaska. And if you scroll down just a little bit and click on TV maps, you'll see a lot of the same images there that you'll see on our show tonight. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know at david.snider@noaa.gov. Across the region, the main focus for active weather is really going to be out across the west coast, through the mountains and into the Seward Peninsula there. From Bettles all the way down through Galena and Grayling in the lower Yukon Valley. Winter weather advisories are posted there. And in these regions, we can expect about 2 to 4, maybe 5 inches of snow in the region and occasional gusty conditions. This will probably improve after we get through Wednesday afternoon for most of these locations, starting in the south and working its way northward. In fact, some areas here across Southwest may see improvements as early as tonight. As we look out toward the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there, in those regions you're going to see a lot more snow, and your winter storm warnings there, shaded in red, are going to be in effect at least through tomorrow afternoon, in some cases tomorrow evening. We're expecting about anywhere from 5 to 8, maybe 9 inches of snow in some cases, and as much as 12. But on top of that, you're probably going to have some gusty winds as much as 40 miles per hour in a few places, especially closer to the coast. And that's really going to limit visibility, which may make things a little more dangerous for you. So make sure that you're using extra precautions if you're traveling around. And the same goes for the Seward Peninsula area, especially across the northern coast and down toward the Seward Peninsula coastline. Higher amounts of snow, probably not as much as what we'll see up here across the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. But we're looking at about 2 to 4 inches of snow and gusts to 40 miles per hour in this region as well. And so visibility may be substantially limited, probably not reaching blizzard criteria for most areas, but the effects could be the same if you're out in it. Visibility could go down very quickly. For the Baldwin Peninsula and Selawik Valley area, though, we are expecting blizzard conditions, and with that, a blizzard warning will be in effect until 3 o'clock Wednesday morning. So during the overnight, we expect conditions to improve there for the Baldwin Peninsula and Selawik Valley area. So look for gradual improvement throughout the daytime tomorrow, again from south and west to north and east as we go throughout the day. And you can see the same map and get alerts anytime by going to weather.gov/Alaska and clicking on your part of the map. That'll give you your very latest update for your part of Alaska. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and you can see a broad southerly flow working up the west coast and an area of low pressure here working across the northern Bering Sea. Of course, we all know this has been chewing up the sea ice for the season so far, and it looks like there will be a potential for some of that to reform, but maybe not until later on in the weekend and early next week before we get a really good dose of colder air that will start to be a little bit more progressive for moving that ice southward and growing more ice. Until then, pretty rough conditions for sea ice across the north and western coast there. You can see quite a bit of cloud cover across south central and the interior. No surprise there with that southerly flow dragging up moisture from the Pacific. Across the east, generally dry conditions and even some sunshine across southeast today. Conditions have been a little bit windy in the morning, though. As we get into the overnight hours, some of those drainage winds coming out of the Haines and Skagway areas have been a little bit rough. Small craft advisories are expected to be to continue there for the Lynn Canal as we go the next couple days, and probably talking about some strong winds in the Haines and Skagway areas themselves, especially during the overnight hours, thanks to that setup really not changing too much until we get into the next, about Thursday, Friday or so before we start to see another weather system push up right against the outer coast. As you can see, the clouds really don't change too much as you push further northward. This is a lot of warm and wet air moving north, and with this does have some icing concerns. We'll talk about that coming up in our aviation section here in a minute. And you can see some of the colder lower clouds dropping in southward, coming in from the north, wrapping into St. Paul, and a trough of low pressure was passing through that region with some areas of snow earlier today. And out across the west from Adak all the way out toward Shemya, you can see the next weather system gearing up. The low hadn't quite made it to Attu as we headed into the afternoon hours today, but it was certainly powering up, and it looked like it would be in the 950 range as we move toward the end of the day. Let's take a look at the surface weather chart for today, and you'll notice high pressure sitting across the Gulf at around 1,026 millibars, and a more substantial area of high pressure sitting here across the southern Yukon and the western parts of British Columbia. A trough of low pressures on the eastern side of that, and on this side is really where we're seeing the substantial cold air that everyone in the lower 48 is talking about. A lot of that is just not even close to reaching Alaska. As you look at the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, areas of rain and snow were moving through. We had a little bit of fog sitting right across the Yukon coastline all the way down and east of the Pribilofs right here with snow, and north of the Alaska Peninsula. Low pressure there sitting just off the coast of Savunga and Nome at 1,002 millibars. A trough of low pressure also sitting right across the southern outer coast of southeast. And here's the next weather system. You can barely see it here on your screen. 954 millibars, a little bit of snow out around Attu. And as that moves north and east tonight, it'll rise to about 955. There'll be some pretty decent winds, storm force winds moving through the chain. The south side of that looks fairly warm and wet. Rain and snow on the north side, and snow even further north, not quite to the Pribilofs as we head through tonight. The current weather system that's working through the northern Bering should make its way into the Chukchi Sea at 1,006 millibars, dragging a diminishing strength of a disturbance into western Alaska. With that, we expect snow to continue ahead of that. And again, this is where we've got that better, stronger southerly flow into the Kobuk and Noatak Valley region and the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. It's a pretty good setup for decent amounts of snow. And again, about 6 to 12 inches, with that highest amount, 12 inches, being a little bit more sparse there, probably harder to find that. Out across Kodiak Island, areas of rain and snow, with snow across some of the mountains there, and across southeast, generally dry conditions, but that trough of low pressure will be kind of the vacuum for some of that colder, dense air moving through Skagway and Haines, so be prepared for some gusts as you have seen the last couple nights. As we get back into your Wednesday, low pressure sits pretty much in the same old spot, 956 millibars, pushing a front out ahead of it, and the further away it goes, the harder it is for that weather system to maintain that boundary. So we're going to see that fall apart as we get into your Thursday. Out ahead of that, though, the winds will be fairly strong from the south, and as this is working across the region, don't be surprised to run into some turbulence if you're trying to fly through the Aleutians tomorrow. It's going to be pretty bumpy there, especially through the Pribilofs. We're expecting at least some considerable moderate turbulence across the entire region over land areas. And as the front is passing through, wouldn't be surprised to see a few minutes of isolated severe. So just be on your guard and be prepared if you're flying west or east over the chain or out over any Bering Sea locations tomorrow. Probably won't make it to the southwest coast as we get into your Wednesday afternoon, but there will still be some areas of fog and probably some light amounts of snow there. The main thrust of snow will be out here across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range and moving slowly into the middle and eastern interior, though we're not expecting to see any warning level amounts of snow, so probably anything we see will be generally light, maybe an inch or two at best. Across the northern Gulf Coast, pockets of rain there, generally dry conditions across southeast. The winds will probably shut down as we head into the daytime hours. And as we get into Thursday, the next boundary here starts to creep in across the outer coast. You'll see clouds start to pick up across places closer to Sitka and out toward, as you head out toward Heidelberg. Areas northward toward Gustavus, probably looking at an increase of cloud cover there, and better chance for showers across the outer coast, but not really inland very much. The interior passages look to be fairly dry as high pressure is still generally in charge. Remember how we said our front as it moves further north and east away from the center of low pressure is weakening? Well, that's what happens when you see that line breaking up. That means it's dissipating, or could be forming. In this case, it's falling apart. Low pressure here is rising to 966 millibars, and we're still dealing with some decent amounts of warm air. So we've got rain across the chain, snow showers continuing across the Pribilofs and most of the southwest coast. The next thrust of snow will be working its way across the interior of southwest Alaska, and some pockets of snow from Kaktovik westward toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, and some areas of fog around Utqiagvik, Point Barrow, and perhaps some light snow around south central. Let's take a look at your temperatures as we get into your Wednesday morning. Teens and 20s for southeast. That's what happens on a cool, clear night. It looks like single digits for Fairbanks. Teens and 20s for the Cook Inlet region, including Talkeetna at 17, 34 around Kodiak, 25 for Bethel, and about the same there for Kotzebue, 28 around Nome. High temperatures for your Wednesday back in the mid to upper 20s for the middle Tanana Valley, 27 in Tanana itself. Freezing or even warmer for the Cook Inlet region, Anchorage near 32, 38 in Homer, 42 in Kodiak. The Alaska Peninsula temperatures in the 30s and 40s. Southeast closing in on 43 for Sitka and 20 in Utqiagvik. Overnight low temperatures Thursday morning. Cold for Fort Yukon at 5, 27 in Bethel, and high temperatures there back in the 20s. And now, aviation weather around Alaska. On to aviation weather now. IFR conditions are expected to hold across the west coast and across the south-facing slopes of the western Brooks Range there as weather's moving in pretty hard from the south. You'll see that stretching up into the Chukchi coast as well. NBFR will be fairly widespread across south central, southwest, and portions of the interior. Notable breaks, though, across the Tanana Valley and across the eastern sections of the Copper River Basin all the way into southeast. Southeast starting off just fine tomorrow. Out across the west, the next weather makers moving in across the central and western chain. You can see IFR spreading northward into St. Paul and St. George, not quite to St. Matthew or Nunivak Island by the afternoon. And we'll start to see some breaks in the IFR across the west, though you'll see a return of IFR across a large part of the northern and western sections of the Alaska Range as you get up toward the Chukchi Coast and the Brooks Range, and then eastward into the middle and upper Yukon Valley. Expect widespread IFR there. Southeast looking pretty good again still through the afternoon, and no big changes into Thursday morning. Marginal conditions will be fairly widespread across the interior, the Gulf Coast, all the way across the Aleutian Chain and the Alaska Peninsula. NBFR and IFR will increase in coverage, and look for IFR to spread in across the Yukon Delta and parts of the Kuskokwim Delta into the Kilbucks, and then out across Nome, and then north and east into Kotzebue Sound. A wave of IFR will be moving north and east, so watch for conditions to go down overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday, and then spreading eastward across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. All of that improves substantially by Thursday afternoon, with marginal conditions really holding for most of the interior, including a few areas probably looking at some breaks there around the Tanana Valley, but north and south of that, fairly heavy NBFR. And then across the Gulf Coast, things looking fairly widespread for marginal conditions, but southeast still looking VFR most of the day. As you get into St. Lawrence Island, the western end of the Yukon Delta, and the Kuskokwim coastline, expect IFR conditions there. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see IFR holding all the way through Wednesday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look to stay around IFR conditions most of the time. Rainy Pass probably leans over toward IFR as we go throughout the day. Windy Pass also leaning that direction, IFR by the end of Wednesday afternoon. Isabel Pass looking like IFR will develop there throughout the day. Mentasta Pass probably sees some improvement as we go throughout your day. Visual flight rules expected there by the afternoon. Tanita Pass, the other hand, goes the other direction. Marginal conditions in the morning and then pushing over toward IFR. Portage Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions there, and Chilkoot and White Pass looking A-OK. VFR conditions throughout the day. Freezing levels show the surface freezing line hugging the Gulf Coast all the way out toward the Alaska Peninsula, and just not quite to the eastern chain, but kind of nearing it. The surface freezing line just north of St. Paul as well. Everything else, the warmer air aloft, still well to the south and to the west of the region. So you have to go up a little bit higher to run into any significant icing potential. There is plenty of moisture. We do have a south wind, and there is cold air aloft, but with the warmer air streaming in, I think you're going to have to go to about 4,000 to about 7,000 feet across the southern Bering and across the western chain there. And then across the interior, about 3,500 to 4,000 feet is where we start seeing that significant icing threat showing up there. We'll call it isolated moderate right now across the north slope, the west coast, and all the way down to the Alaska Range and just about Tanita Pass into Valdez and maybe just north of Portage there. Southeast right now, no significant icing concerns for you tomorrow. Here's the jet stream. We have two major pathways, one of those roaring across the Pacific at 120 to 150 knots, taking a huge dip in the trough there across the North Pacific and back into western Alaska and then back out across the Gulf of Alaska, meeting up with a low across southeast and the Pacific Northwest. But you also have this Arctic stream coming in right across the Bering Strait and then diving into the interior before jogging northward over a weak ridge across western Canada. So our main weather maker really is this south flow that's pumping in heat and moisture, but we also have that cold air that's trying to influence parts of the interior right now. At 9,000 feet, you can see that strong southerly flow really kind of dying off as it moves into the western interior with 20-knot winds there. Otherwise, 40 to 50 knots across the central and eastern chain and southwest, and our parent low here across the west coast. Light northerly winds coming across southeast. You can see those at 15 to 20 around 3,000 feet. Strong southerly flow coming up the west coast, but it really beefs up as you head out into the Bering with wind speeds there 50 to 75 knots. So, and that's really where we're going to focus on turbulence today and tomorrow. For the west, some below 5,000 feet there across parts of the Yukon Valley and the upper Kuskokwim, but the western chain there below 4,000 feet. Watch for areas of isolated severe. For the central and eastern chain is that main quarter of fast-moving winds moves from west-east throughout the day. So things will improve out in the west first, and worsen in the east as we go throughout your afternoon on Wednesday. For southeast, the north slope, the interior, and most of south central, things look pretty quiet. Watch for a few bumps there around the Homer area as you go throughout your afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. Thanks. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good, very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state. Okay.
And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental. Okay. So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there. Okay. So using
there's
these.
The salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right. Right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound. And if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down. And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before. So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about AKwx, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKwx, right? AKwx, Alaska AKwx, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation, so more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with your marine weather now, and looking at the ice edge, no surprise that we're not seeing a whole lot of changes here across the Kotzebue Sound, Chukchi Coast region into Norton Sound, or across the Yukon Delta. Every area shaded in the light blue is marginal ice, and even that is very thin through the Bering Strait. Some areas of higher concentration ice closer to Gamble and on the south side of St. Lawrence Island, but really most of that is north of the Bering Strait and over the Chukchi Sea. The good news is that as we get toward the end of the week and into the weekend, there are signs of colder air working its way southward, and at that point we may freeze over a large part of the northern sections of the Bering Sea, assuming the wind lays down, as sea surface temperatures are still primed and ready to freeze, but we have to get that colder air back in place. Here's a look at Wednesday's forecast for southeast now. Northerly winds in the Lynn Canal, probably bringing up small craft advisories to the region as we go through your daytime tomorrow. 5-foot seas there, 3, maybe 2-foot seas as you head further south down into the Clarence Strait. Across the outer coast, north and westerly winds coming down, looking about 20 knots or so with 5 to 7-foot seas. Not too bad considering southeast in the wintertime. Across the inside passage on Thursday, winds remain generally light, 10 to 15. You're looking at about 2 to 3-foot seas on the inside. And across the outer coast, 20 to 25. Seas coming up just a little bit, 6 to 8-foot seas there from around Yakutat and Icy Cape all the way down toward the Dixon entrance on Thursday. For south central, light winds across the northern parts of Cook Inlet and over the ice as you head further south past Callaghan Island. 3 to 4-foot seas and 15-knot winds. You're looking at southeasterlies coming into Resurrection Bay and the Barren Islands from the Gulf. 15 to 20 there. Light winds inside of Prince William Sound with small seas as a bonus. And westerlies across the northern Gulf at 15. Those become southerly as we get into Thursday. Easterlies inside of the Sound with a 3-foot sea. Light northeasterly winds continue in the northern parts of Cook Inlet, but look at the winds strengthening here across the Barrens. South and southeasterly winds up to 25 with 5 to 7-foot seas on Thursday. And the further west you go, of course, the winds are going to come up. As we look at Bristol Bay, light winds there, seas coming up to 5 feet, 8-foot seas down the coast with a 35-knot wind. Winds still coming in from the north and west over Kodiak Island, about 15 to 20. Southeasterlies over Sand Point with seas up to 10 feet. You can see those picking up a little bit more as we get to Thursday. The big action's still out to the west, but things are starting to change here for Thursday. For Bristol Bay up to 30 knots, 25 knots from areas north of Cold Bay. Southerlies coming into Sand Point and Perryville, and also southerly winds back toward Kodiak Island, 25 to 30 there with 11 to 12-foot seas. 5-foot seas, though, inside of Shelikof Strait. Now we get into the big stuff. Anywhere from 40 to 50 knot winds across the chain. Storm force winds across the region for sure, with southerlies there, 40-foot seas between Adak and Kiska, of course. And south and easterly winds there from Nikolsky to Unalaska, you're looking at 18 to 30-foot seas across the Pacific coastline. As we get into Thursday, anywhere from 28 to 41-foot seas across the Pacific coast, 30 to 40 knot winds there across the Bering Sea coast. Still looking at generally southerly winds, but here comes the west and northwesterly push across the western chain. 36-foot seas there between Adak and Kiska with a low pressure center still to the southwest of the Pribilofs, right about here. So you can see Wednesday, Thursday are going to be pretty choppy and rough days. A good day to just hunker down, stay in port. South and easterly winds there around Nunivak Island, 25 knots or so with 5 to 7-foot seas. You're looking at 11 to 15-foot seas from St. Matthew to the Pribilofs. 30 to 40 knot wind there from the east and southeast. All of that, of course, increasing as that weather moves closer to the Pribilofs. The low still to the west on Thursday, though, as we just saw, 30 knots with a 16-foot sea, 19-foot seas around St. Matthew, and easterly wind at 40, and 20 to 30 knot winds north of Nunivak Island with 4 to 11-foot seas and building as we go. Across the North Slope, light winds blowing offshore, 10 knots over the ice. North and westerlies coming onshore over the ice that's there, 15 to 20 knots, and northerlies with seas up to 4 feet around St. Lawrence Island with that 15-knot wind. Becoming easterly on Thursday, north and easterly winds working through the Chukchi, 15 to 20, and west winds 15 to 20 across the Beaufort Sea for your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, high pressures in charge out west. That's going to make for a blustery situation again tonight for Haines and Skagway. The wind should settle down during the daytime tomorrow. The best chance for accumulating snow around the Kobuk and Noatak region up toward Ambler and maybe as far east as Bettles, but most of that will be a little bit closer to the west. As much as a foot of snow there, most cases probably looking at about 4 to 8, maybe 9 inches of snow. Further south you go, those snow amounts decrease, but you're going to look at a better chance for wind around the Seward Peninsula there. Gusts to 40 could really drop visibility. Do be careful as you go through tonight and tomorrow, as the warnings will expire and the weather should improve from southwest to north and east as we go. Then we're preparing for the next wave of weather working across the Aleutian chain with storm force winds and pretty high seas as we go through Wednesday and again on Thursday. That wave of weather will start to weaken as it works toward the western sections of Alaska, bringing a chance for precipitation across south central and some rain and clouds closer to the outer coast of southeast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.